time for the Longines Chronoscope, a television journal of the important issues of the hour, brought to you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. A presentation of the Longines Whitnor Watch Company, maker of Longines, the world's most honored watch, and Whitnor, distinguished companion to the world-honored Longines.
Good evening. This is David Ross. May I introduce our co-editors for this edition of the Longines Chronoscope, Mr. William Bradford Huey and Mr. Henry Hazlitt. Our distinguished guest for this evening is the Honorable John Sherman Cooper, Senator-elect from Kentucky.
Senator Cooper, we're very happy to welcome you to Chronoscope this evening. I'd like to begin by asking you, because of your experience in the UN, whether you think there's any chance for a truce in Korea now.
Well, as of the moment and immediately, I do not think so. Of course, there's always hope, but I don't look forward to any immediate truce. Frankly, I've never felt that the Russians want a truce. I think their action in the UN in recent days on the resolution, the Indian resolution, is good proof of that.
Well,
I'm not giving up hope, though.
General MacArthur says that he thinks he has a clear and definite solution of the problem. Do you think, in view of that General Eisenhower ought to consult with him now?
Well, of course, that's a question for General Eisenhower. I would guess that he would find out what his plan is. I think he would do that.
Well, what steps do you think can be taken to put pressure on the Chinese communists to want a truce?
Well, I think you've always got to think of this Korean question as part of the larger difficulties between Russia and the rest of the world, and that you start out by knowing it's a difficult problem and a very long problem, because we are the real force there. I believe that we have got to have the strength in Korea which will give the greatest influence to our position.
Well, what are some of the steps that would increase our strength, Senator, do you think?
Not knowing myself what the military dispositions are there, I'm not certain as to how much should be added, but if we're to convince Russia, and Russia primarily, that they cannot win and that they must adjust the position in Korea, then I think we've got to have the strength. Further, I certainly favor the proposition of General Eisenhower that as quickly as we can, we build up the strength of the South Koreans. And then I would urge strongly that every bit of influence that we can bring to bear upon the other members of the United Nations should be brought to get from them added military strength, added economic strength.
Well, Senator Cooper, our viewers, of course, tonight are thinking about the USS Helena out in the Pacific and all of this meeting that's going on out there. Now, sir, first of all, why do you think all of these cabinet members are being rushed out to see General Eisenhower and carried aboard by helicopter and so forth?
Well, it's a good operation.
Well, it doesn't seem a little melodramatic to you. I wonder.
No, I don't think so. I think it's very practical. In the first place, everybody is interested in Korea. He's just been there. He's got whatever information that he could get there, and I think it's with his experience that he has got new information and perhaps a much clearer viewpoint. Mr. Dulles has been in Washington conferring with the State Department, and he has their views. And now they meet together, and there's a chance to bring together those different viewpoints. But from a very practical viewpoint, I think it'll probably be the best opportunity he'll have until he takes the oath of office, and perhaps for a long time after that, to get as many of his advisors together and have the chance to confer without interruption.
Well, I think they're talking about other things besides Korea, then.
I would think so, yes.
Well,
it's
sir,
a very fine thing.
One of the things that makes you interesting to our viewers, I'm sure, is that you're a Republican who's just been elected to the Senate down in Kentucky, and I believe that you are the only Republican that was elected to the Senate in a state that did not vote for Eisenhower. Is that correct, sir?
Well, that is true, but it just lacked a few votes of voting for Eisenhower. Out of about 1 million votes, Mr. Stevenson carried Kentucky by only 700 votes.
And yet, though Stevenson carried the state, you were elected to the Senate by, what was your majority, sir?
About 29,000 votes.
Now, let me ask you this, sir. Why were you elected to the Senate? What did you have that General Eisenhower didn't have down in Kentucky?
Well, I'd like to make it plain that I probably wouldn't be here on this program if General Eisenhower hadn't been a candidate. That great
why do you
sweep
think
of his gave me the chance.
But why do you think you ran ahead of the ticket in Kentucky, sir?
Mm-hmm.
Is it because you are well known?
Well,
been to the
I
Senate
have.
before?
This makes the third race I've made for the Senate in 6 years. And of course, they do know me, and I would hope that I was in the Senate 2 years, and I hope and they approved of my record there. Then I was on the ground making a fight all the time. General Eisenhower came into Kentucky one day. If we could have got him back, he would have carried Kentucky. But for about 8 or 9 months, I was on the ground every day making the fight.
Well, now, the Republican Party, is it strong in Kentucky, and is it a growing party there?
One of the things that questions I'm always asked is, and you are a Republican from Kentucky. Actually, Kentucky has a rather strong Republican Party. Out of about 1 million registered votes, we have a registered vote of about 425,000 registered Republicans. And we cast consistently a good Republican vote. Since 1900, we've had 5 out of the 15 governors.
But you're about the first Republican who's been sent to Congress by Kentucky in 25 years, weren't you, in 1946?
Well, in 1946, I was the first one who had been elected to the Senate.
To the Senate.
In 25 years.
Yes.
Well, coming from a border state as you do, sir, and from a state that has a strong Republican Party, what do you think of the Republican Party's chances of making the South a real two-party system in the South?
My state is, as you said, a border state. And in that category, you could class West Virginia, Missouri, Oklahoma, and I think even Tennessee. I think that all of those states, those 4 states, have possibilities to become Republican states, or to at least to be in a position where they could turn Republican majorities much more often. And I think there that it's a problem of getting more interest from the outside, in Kentucky and these border states, and in the parties in those states, watching their leadership, having good programs, and doing their best to develop their own party. I think the situation in the South is different. While our state is not typically a southern state politically, we have some of the same problems. We have the problem of not having local and state administrations, which give you continuity. What I think can be done in the South is to take advantage of the Eisenhower victory, to take into the leadership some of the Democrats who voted for General Eisenhower, to take into that leadership even more importantly, the young people who came under his banner this year.
Did Eisenhower
Well, Senator,
attract...
although you were a Republican, you have been serving as a delegate on the UN, haven't you, as an appointee of the Truman administration?
Yes, I served as a delegate in 1949.
And because of your
51.
experience there, I'd like to ask you some questions about the UN. First, do you think the United Nations is a success?
Well, it's not a success in the terms that people had hoped. I think it's had a success, so I think its great success is that it's been an instrument which has held together the nations who are members, other than the satellite nations and Russia, and kept them pretty generally up on together as against Russian domination and aggression.
Well, hasn't one of its chief effects been to act as a sounding board for Russia in propaganda against the United States?
Yes, it's given Russia a forum. It's also given the United States, Great Britain, smaller countries a forum. Also, it has given the other nations of the world, at least the representatives are there, a chance to see the Russians, to hear them, and to analyze their propaganda, and I think that's been of definite value.
Well, sir, our viewers, I'm sure, would like to have your views on what the Republican Party is likely to do on domestic issues on January the 20th. First of all, sir, do you believe that the Republican Party will reduce taxes?
I think it will take the steps which will lead to reduction of taxes. I think reduction of taxes depends, as we all know, upon what happens in Korea, in the general war situation.
Do you think that the Republican Party will attempt to repeal any of the so-called social legislation that's been built up by the new and fair deals?
In detail, there may be specific laws that will be repealed. In general, I think the general programs of Social Security, of the wage and hour law, some labor legislation, general social programs will be maintained, but they will be examined and analyzed.
Well, now, you come from a state that has a considerable labor vote. Do you think that there'll be more strikes under a Republican administration than there have been?
I have the belief that there will be fewer strikes, and I think we've already seen some evidence of that since the election, that some strikes are being settled. The reason I say that is I believe that when labor knows, and capital as well, but I think particularly labor, because I think it's generally understood that they've had I think a stronger advocate that, and the merits always should provide, that when they know now that they've got to do what they say they want to do, bargain collectively, well, then you're going to have better chances for agreement.
Well, I'm sorry, sir, our time is up, and thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you very much.
The opinions you've heard our speakers express tonight are entirely their own. The editorial board for this edition of the Longines Chronoscope was Mr. William Bradford Huey and Mr. Henry Hazlitt. Our distinguished guest was the Honorable John Sherman Cooper, Senator-elect from Kentucky. Under any Christmas tree, it's the little packages which intrigue. What can it be, we say? And this Christmas, many hope that in one like this, there'll be a Longines, the world's most honored watch. Truly, throughout the world, no other name on a Christmas watch means so much as the name Longines. In the whole world, there are few watches to equal Longines in quality, and none of such great renown. Among the finest watches of the world, Longines alone has won 10 World's Fair grand prizes, 28 gold medal awards, and so many honors for accuracy. Now, if this Christmas you wish to give the gift of great prestige, why not a Longines? Every Longines watch is superlative in styling, superb in finish, unsurpassed for faithful timekeeping. Yet unbelievably, you may buy and proudly give a Longines watch this Christmas for as little as $71.50. Longines, the world's most honored watch, the world's most honored Christmas gift, premier product of the Longines Whitnall Watch Company, since 1866, maker of watches of the highest character. We invite you to join us every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday evening at this same time for the Longines Chronoscope, a television journal of important issues of the hour, broadcast on behalf of Longines, the world's most honored watch, and Whitnall, distinguished companion to the world-honored Longines. This is David Ross speaking for your regular host, Frank Knight, reminding you that Longines and Whitnall watches are sold and serviced from coast to coast by more than 4,000 leading jewelers who proudly display this emblem, Agency for Longines Whitnall Watches.
Time for the Longines Chronoscope, a television journal of the important issues of the hour. A presentation of the Longines Whitnall Watch Company, maker of Longines, the world's most honored watch, and Whitnall, distinguished companion to the world-honored Longines.
Good evening. This is David Ross, speaking for your regular host, Frank Knight. May I introduce our co-editors for this edition of the Longines Chronoscope. Mr. William Bradford Huey, editor of the American Mercury and Mr. Henry Hazlitt, contributing editor of Newsweek magazine. Our distinguished guest for this evening is the Honorable Herbert R. O'Connor, Senator from Maryland.
Senator, I'm very happy to welcome you to Chronoscope this evening. As you're a member of the Senate Internal Security Committee, I'd like to begin by asking you what your impression is of this three-man panel report that was turned in by the United Nations, for the United Nations, to Secretary General Lee.
Mr. Hazlitt, I approve of the conclusions reached by the international jurists. These three distinguished attorneys have done a comprehensive job. I regret that it was necessary, really, to invoke their aid because the questions presented seem to us to be very clear, and that is that subversives, those individuals of American citizenry who are disposed to work against the interests of the United States, we feel ought never to have been employed in the United Nations. And the fact that tonight some 15 of them are either under suspension or have been separated from the service indicates that there was very much to be done. I do think that the conclusions reached by the international panel are to be approved.
Well, there were several important conclusions there. The first one in importance seems to me that anybody who was an active member of the Communist Party could be dismissed. I assume that you agree with that thoroughly.
Wholeheartedly.
And then there was another recommendation that anybody who admitted that he had been subversive in the past could be suspended until his record was looked into. I assume you agree with that, too.
Well, that is correct, I do.
And third, and I thought quite an important one in view of the public confusion on the point, was this, that anybody who refused to testify on the ground that it might incriminate him could be dismissed and should be dismissed on the ground that he had created a suspicion of guilt by his refusal to answer. Now, do you agree with that final point?
I do, Ms. Hazlitt, but I would like to just add another word or two in respect to that. Our principal difficulty in the hearings up until this very day has been that many of our people, of our citizens, labor under a misapprehension. They feel that having secured a position with an international organization, that they are beyond the reach of a regularly constituted agency of the federal government inquiring into their actions, not as United Nations members, not in relation to the particular work, but prior to their association with the organization or outside of the scope of that work. And we, of course, have been definitely of the belief that the Senate committee has a right to inquire into their affiliation with the Communist Party, for example, or their engagement in subversive activities. And when they decline to answer, on the ground that to answer would tend to incriminate them, we feel that that puts them under suspicion to such an extent that they are not suitable persons to be in the Secretariat of the United Nations.
Now, sir, to clarify just a bit, many of our viewers, I'm sure, feel that your committee is deliberately harassing the United Nations. Number one, the committee is the McCarran Committee, isn't it?
It is the McCarran Committee, a regularly constituted subcommittee of the Senate Judiciary
And you're holding
Committee.
hearings in New York, and who are your colleagues on that committee, sir?
Well, Senator McCarran of Nevada, Senator Ferguson of Michigan, Senator Watkins, Senator Jenner, Senator Willis Smith, the former president of the American Bar Association, Senator Eastland of Mississippi, and myself.
Now, have you found evidence that there are communists employed, American communists employed by the United Nations?
Definitely.
And it's your position that you have a right to investigate these people and to expose them?
Not only a right, but a duty.
Now, are you a supporter of the United Nations, sir?
Yes, I'd like to just amplify on that a bit. I am not one who believes that just because these little problems have arisen, possibly not so little, but definitely problems, that is a reason for the abolition of the United Nations as such. I do not think that.
You don't think it'll be necessary to burn down the barn
No.
to get rid of the rats?
I do not think so. I feel that the objectives of the UN are so important in this critical period that we should give support to the UN, and we believe that ultimately our action will restore the confidence of the American people, which I'm regret to say we felt was being shaken when revelations were brought out that communists, people who had been discharged from departments in Washington for their doubtful loyalty, are found in the Secretariat of the United Nations.
You think well, there's an anomalous situation created here, Senator. Now, my understanding of this committee report, this panel report, was that Lee, the Secretary General, could fire any member of a non-communist nation who was guilty of being a communist, but that he couldn't fire a communist, of course, from a communist nation. Now, doesn't that create a very anomalous position within the United Nations?
It does. And in all fairness to Mr. Trigby Lee, I feel that the responsibility has not been his, or the fault, if any, has not been his, because I think he has made a genuine effort to discharge his responsibilities and at the same time to retain the status of the UN as it was originally conceived. It is, of course, an international organization. Its secretariat is not supposed to be under dictation from any member nation. And consequently, he has had to chart a course which would be between that of giving recognition to the rights of the United States, for example, as against the communist countries.
So doesn't the very fact that we have communist nations as members of the organization make the organization either ineffective or effective as a sounding board for communism?
Exactly so, and it is to be expected that with the international organization, including communist nations, that of necessity their representatives in the Secretariat will be sympathizers with their particular government.
Well, do you think Russia should keep the veto power that it at present has?
Well, I think, of course, that there are reasons on both sides. I do not think, of course, that it should be carried to the extent that it has, because in a way, it demonstrates the fact that Russia is not sincere in their efforts to achieve the objectives of the UN.
Senator, is this a fair statement, sir, that our keeping the United Nations in New York, allowing it to meet here, that is a calculated risk on the part of our nation, isn't it?
It is, and it calls for this one extra consideration. I think as the host nation, the United States is within its rights in demanding that extra precautions be taken to guard the internal security of the United States.
Moving on from the United Nations, sir, I believe your committee found a rather interesting case of communism inside the armed services, did it not?
Yes, that was in the Lieutenant Thurman case, and a very disgraceful one.
And you found that an officer in the Army was actually in charge of prisoners on Koji Island, wasn't he?
Actually, he has been commissioned. He's still in the Army, although he's under observation by the military authorities. He had been commissioned, had gone to Koji, and had actually been in charge of some 40,000.
Now that your committee...
Some 40,000
prisoners of war.
Now that your committee has called attention to that situation, do you think that it's being corrected?
Well, I certainly think it ought to be, and I have enough confidence in the Secretary of Defense and of the entire military establishment to believe that they are going to the bottom of it, as he should.
Well, weren't the circumstances rather remarkable under which he was taken in?
Yes.
Didn't he refuse to answer some question of importance?
Yes, in the application for commission, in answer to the questions as to whether he is or has been a member of subversive organization, he declined to answer that on constitutional grounds.
Well, and he was nonetheless accepted.
He was nonetheless accepted. And
Senator, we can't, our viewers, I know, wouldn't want you to leave without recalling the fact that you were part of the Kefauver investigation. Now, after looking back in retrospect on the Kefauver activities, do you think that was useful for the country?
I think highly useful. Yes, yes, I do.
Yeah, you were one of those, I think, that made Mr. O'Dwyer enjoy the climate down in Mexico, I believe.
Well, at least he has sojourned there for the period since that time.
Well, what do you think about the situation as far as crime in our cities now? Do you think that it's still one that calls for investigation?
Oh, I think undoubtedly so. I do not think the work of any one committee in a limited time would clear up the very unfortunate situation that has existed in America in the large metropolitan areas particularly.
And since you are not to be a member of the new Congress, sir, is it your opinion that the new Congress should continue such an investigation?
I think there are many things to be said in favor of some periodic check, whether it would be of a committee set up as the Kefauver committee was, or whether it would be one that would give just a review of conditions in the country as well.
Well, thank you very much for being with us this evening, sir.
Great pleasure.
The opinions you've heard our speakers express tonight are entirely their own. The editorial board for this edition of the Longines Chronoscope was Mr. William Bradford Huey and Mr. Henry Hazlitt. Our distinguished guest was the Honorable Herbert R. O'Connor, Senator from Maryland. The problem of selecting a Christmas gift of great prestige for someone near and dear is most happily solved with a Longines watch. Discriminating men and women appreciate the elegance of Longines watches, their greater accuracy, their faithfulness, and world honors confirm their judgment. For among the world's finest watches, Longines watches alone have won 10 World's Fair grand prizes, 28 gold medal awards, and highest honors for accuracy from government observatories. Yes, the problem of selecting a Christmas gift of great prestige for someone near and dear is indeed most happily solved with a Longines watch. Yet you may buy and proudly give a Longines watch this Christmas for as little as $71.50. And may I add, if you pay $71.50 or more for a watch, you are paying the price of a Longines. And you should insist on getting a Longines, the world's most honored watch, the world's most honored Christmas gift, premier product of the Longines Whitnall Watch Company, since 1866, maker of watches of the highest character. We invite you to join us for the Longines Chronoscope, a television journal of important issues of the hour, broadcast on behalf of Longines, the world's most honored watch, and Whitnall, distinguished companion to the world-honored Longines. This is David Ross, speaking for your regular host, Frank Knight, reminding you that Longines and Whitnall watches are sold and serviced from coast to coast by more than 4,000 leading jewelers who proudly display this emblem, Agency for Longines Whitnall Watches.
Honored watch is Longines. Longines watches have won 10 World's Fair grand prizes, 28 gold medals, and more honors for accuracy than any other timepiece. Longines, the world's most honored watch, is made and guaranteed by the Longines Whitnall Watch Company.
It's time for the Longines Chronoscope, a television journal of the important issues of the hour, brought to you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. A presentation of the Longines Whitnall Watch Company, maker of Longines, the world's most honored watch, and Whitnall, a distinguished companion to the world-honored Longines. Good evening, this is Frank Knight. May I introduce our co-editors for this edition of the Longines Chronoscope? Mr. Bruno Shaw, author, editor, and commentator, and Mr. William Bradford Huey, editor of the American Mercury. Our distinguished guest for this evening is the Honorable Homer Ferguson, United States Senator from Michigan. In this spontaneous and unrehearsed discussion, the opinions expressed are necessarily those of the speakers.
Senator Ferguson, our audience, of course, knows you as a one-man crime buster in Detroit and as a distinguished member of the Senate. Specifically, sir, just what are your committee assignments at the moment?
I'm a member of the Judiciary Committee and also of the Policy Committee and the Appropriations Committee, Mr. Huey.
And the Judiciary Committee, the subcommittee, of course, is concerned with security at the moment, isn't it,
Yes,
sir?
there's a subcommittee of that committee which is handling the internal security
And
investigations.
that committee is concerned with the President's current effort to enforce stricter censorship on the American press, I believe.
Yes, it is concerned with that, and
And what has been your position, sir? Have you opposed the President's efforts to make censorship stricter on the press?
yes, I have opposed that, and the reason that I have opposed it, Mr. Huey, is that I believe that in a republic such as ours, that we must have freedom of the press, freedom of thought, freedom of speech. One of the very fundamentals that we must have are those freedoms. And, of course, the danger is this, that a weak government uses the weapon of censorship
Well,
to conceal.
How far would you carry that, Senator? How far would you carry it in the field of national defense? How free could you be with publication of news in national defense?
Well, of course, I'm a firm believer, and I've stated on the Senate floor that I believe in the security. And there are certain things in the national defense that they should determine whether or not it's for our security. You can't wear on your cuffs all of the secrets of the national military establishment.
If the Reconstruction Finance Committee, sir, could have decided what information could properly be published in the United States, we probably would not have had some of the recent revelations, would we?
You wouldn't have had any of it, and as I say, a weak government goes to the censorship to attempt to keep things from the public. Take the order after the President issued. Let's give good faith to his issuing it on the question of security. But he was delegating to each one of his men in the various departments and agencies the right to determine on their own what was to be security. And the OPS put one in, anything that might be embarrassing to them.
Wouldn't you say that he might have a more reasonable approach to it, and that the people would accept it with greater reason if he issued such an order together with the press, with a selected group of the press, to discuss it and to express their judgment on these various kinds of orders, including military censorship?
Oh, there isn't any doubt about that, Mr. Shaw. He should have taken the press in, discussed the whole matter, and first, if there were sufficient causes, had a voluntary censorship. And then, if there couldn't rely on a voluntary one, then he should have used the next as a real censorship on security.
Senator, I believe that the McCarran subcommittee, of which you are a member, has also been considering the matter of the Institute of Public Relations, and particularly the controversial figure of Mr. Jessup. Now, what are your views in the Jessup case?
Well, I would say this, and I'm not going to draw any judgments tonight because we have not finished those, Mr. Huey. The hearings are going on, and my work on the bench has always taught me to hold judgment till the last sentence is in the record. But I'll say this, that so far the record discloses that there was a penetration in the Institute of Pacific Relations of those who at least were giving aid and comfort to the communist line.
You have heard, former Governor Stassen, I believe, before your subcommittee.
Yes, he was even there today. He appeared before the committee.
Well, I'd like to ask one question on that. Wouldn't you say that since Mr. Jessup himself said he was a member of the America First Committee and other very, let's say, right-wing organizations, that it's somewhat incompatible for him to be charged with both that and communist affiliation? But wouldn't you say that regardless of what he's charged with, he's got pretty near 100% record of bad judgment?
Well, I don't want to say it's 100%. That's going a little far on any man's judgment. We all make mistakes. But I think there is some evidence in the record that some of these judgments were very poor.
Now,
I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Our audience, of course, knows you as the colleague of the late Senator Vandenberg, and his memoirs, I understand, are about to be published. Do you think that they're likely to shed any light on this particular controversy?
They'll shed some light. On February the 5th, they'll shed the light that there was a meeting in the White House. And the question
That's
of
1949.
1949. Of furnishing military aid, or the stopping of the aid to the nationalist government in China. The committee in the next few days will receive the copy of the page of the senator's diary that he wrote with his own typewriter.
And you think the Vandenberg revelation will be damaging to the cause of Mr. Jessup and will support Mr. Stassen in the controversy?
Well, I think it supports the contention of Mr. Stassen that the State Department, Mr. Atchison, was perfectly willing to have the aid stopped as of that time, and that Senator Vandenberg was only consulted on the China policy, as I understand it, on that particular occasion.
Was that, Senator, was that committee, I think, of about 20 or 25? Was that a pretty well-balanced committee? Who picked them?
Well, the committee that went, that's another committee in October of 1949.
Oh,
That's the committee that Mr. Stassen is talking about. That's the one that he contends that the record now shows, and they have finally produced the record, showing that the sympathy was on the side of the recognition of Red China.
Was that a well-balanced committee, would you say? Do you know anything
Well,
about it?
I think not.
Yeah.
The reason we're investigating that particular committee was that there's so many members of it were members of the Institute of Pacific Relations, which we are investigating as to whether or not there was penetration by the communist or the communist line.
To sum that point up, sir, do you expect to oppose the appointment of Mr. Jessup to the ambassadorial post that he's recommended for?
I would say at the present time, from what I can learn from the committee hearings, that I should be compelled to vote against the confirmation of Mr. Jessup for this particular post. And I try to reserve judgment as long as possible on these matters, and I want to hear all the evidence, but that's the way I would stand tonight, and I want to frankly say that.
Our audience also knows that you have to do with taxes and money, sir, since you're an important member of the Appropriations Committee. Now, this morning we noticed that we have 11% tax increase. Did you favor that tax increase, sir?
Mr. Huey, I voted against that tax bill. I came to the conclusions, and my conscience really rebelled, that I could not vote for it because I felt that we were placing a burden on the American people that could be avoided by the cutting of expenses in government. And I sincerely believe that that was true.
Have you any idea at all of what that cut could amount to in comparison with all the other things that you're probably in favor of, which is huge national defense, Point 4, Marshall Plan, and all the others? Is it really an amount that is considerable, or is it just a matter of principle to cut it down?
No, it isn't. I believe that we could have taken 6 to 8 billions of dollars. I hesitate mentioning billions of dollars because it's such an enormous sum that it's very difficult to understand. I like to explain a billion as being 1/10 of the entire production of metropolitan Detroit, of all the industries for a year, because they produce about $10 billion worth. So you can see how much goods that is with the amount of automobiles and everything else that's produced in that great metropolitan area.
Senator, I'm sure that our audience wouldn't want you to leave before you gave us a prediction as to whether you think taxes will go even higher in America.
Well, I don't see how they can go much higher, and my reason for saying that, just about 3 weeks ago I met with members of the House and members of the Senate, and we were discussing this tax question, and they came to the conclusion that we are about at the bottom of the barrel. Some of them think we are through the bottom, and there are no other greater sources to actually get returns without diminishing returns. That is, that you tax people so much that business goes down and there is a failure to get taxes rather than to get more.
I see. So to sum up, you believe, as a member of the Appropriations Committee, that we have reached the point of diminishing returns. Thank you very much for being with us tonight, sir.
The editorial board for this edition of the Longines Chronoscope was Mr. Bruno Shaw and Mr. William Bradford Huey. Our distinguished guest was the Honorable Homer Ferguson, United States Senator from Michigan. A watchmaker such as Longines recalls that Christopher Columbus made his great voyages before the watch was invented. His only timepiece was a sand glass, like this rare specimen from the Hayden Planetarium. This was reversed every half hour. The hours on shipboard were the 7 hours of prayer. Now, in those days, the only navigating instrument was a compass. And so navigators of today salute Columbus as the peer of them all. Columbus Day marks a Longines milestone, for one of the 38 World's Fair Awards won by Longines was this gold medal of the St. Louis Columbia Exposition some 59 years ago, the 400th anniversary of the discovery of America, which honored Christopher Columbus. Now consider how consistently Longines watches have maintained their leadership over the years, winner of first prizes for more than 3/4 of a century, including 10 World's Fair grand prizes, 28 gold medals, and literally thousands of awards for accuracy from the great government observatories. Today's Longines watches are our finest, distinguished for exclusive styling, endowed with traditional accuracy and long life. Truly, throughout the world, no other name on a watch means so much as Longines, the world's most honored watch, premier product of the Longines Whitnall Watch Company, since 1866, maker of watches of the highest character. This is Frank Knight, again reminding you that the Longines Chronoscope is brought to you 3 times weekly, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So won't you join us every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday evening at this same time for the Longines Chronoscope, a television journal of the important issues of the hour, broadcast on behalf of Longines, the world's most honored watch, and Whitnall, distinguished companion to the world-honored Longines, sold and serviced from coast to coast by more than 4,000 leading jewelers who proudly display the emblem Agency for Longines Whitnall Watches.
The world's most honored watch is Longines. Longines watches have won 10 World's Fair grand prizes, 28 gold medals, and more honors for accuracy than any other timepiece. Longines, the world's most honored watch, is made and guaranteed by the Longines Whitnall Watch Company.
It's time for the Longines Chronoscope, a television journal of the important issues of the hour, brought to you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. A presentation of the Longines Whitnall Watch Company, maker of Longines, the world's most honored watch, and Whitnall, distinguished companion to the world-honored Longines. Good evening. This is Frank Knight. May I introduce our co-editors for this edition of the Longines Chronoscope? Mr. Edgar Baker, Managing Director of Time Life International, and Mr. Henry Hazlitt, editor of the Freeman and contributing editor of Newsweek magazine. Our distinguished guest for this evening is the Honorable Hubert H. Humphrey, United States Senator from Minnesota. The opinions discussed are necessarily those of the speakers.
Well, Senator Humphrey, I see that the New York Times this morning credits you with a very important victory in helping to get past the President's reorganization plan of the Internal Revenue Bureau. The Times wrote the victory was less a personal one for the President than it was for 3 freshman senators who led the fight: Hubert Humphrey of Minnesota, Mike Monroney of Oklahoma, and Blair Moody of Michigan. So could you begin by telling us what the reorganization plan does, Senator?
Well, the key to the reorganization plan, or the crux of it, is that it removes the political patronage system from the Office of the Collector of Internal Revenue. In other words, it places the appointment of all the collectors of internal revenue in the many revenue districts strictly under the civil service system, the competitive merit examination. I think this is highly desirable. I think that we have had plenty of demonstration of the inadequacy of the politically appointed collectors of internal revenue. It places a premium upon competence and technical background.
Well, Senator, if my memory is correct, of the 64 present collectors, 7 have either been forced to resign or have discharged. Now, doesn't that mean that the President's plan is in effect a plan to prevent himself from making bad appointments?
Well, as a matter of fact, President Truman made none of these appointments, may I say.
Either he or President Roosevelt, I meant to say.
Or any
yes.
president,
Yes.
because may I say that back in the good old days, the days when Andrew Mellon was Secretary of the Treasury, we had an even worse situation than we had now. I don't mean to inject the partisanship into it, but it's literally true.
But these are not holdovers from the Mellon...
They're not holdovers, but the political patronage system just has not produced the kind of caliber and talent that we should have in an office that's as important as the Collector of Internal Revenue's office. Plus the fact that the present collector's office is a busy office. You have over 70 million tax returns, for example, about 50 million taxpayers. And when you consider the tremendous number of taxes that a collector of internal revenue must be responsible for, I think he ought to be recruited and hired on the basis of technical skill, background, experience, and all that comes with a competitive merit system examination.
Well, Senator, the passage of the bill is very timely. The Ides of March and the final date for tax payment are close upon us. I understand that you are in favor of an even tighter tax bill. Is that correct?
I'm in favor of what I call a tighter or a more honorable tax structure. That is absolutely true. I personally believe that the entire tax structure of our country needs a basic overhauling. It has grown pretty much like Topsy. Every time we've needed a little more revenue, we've fished around to find some new way of adding a new tax to the tax structure. In the meantime, some people have been fishing around to see how they could get out of paying taxes.
Senator, what specific recommendations would you make?
Well, my recommendations have been termed, not by myself alone, but by many others over the years, loophole plugging provisions. By that I mean tightening up the tax structure in reference to certain specific tax allowances or tax special treatment taxes that we have in the tax system, such as the capital gains tax structure, family partnerships, the failure to have withholding upon corporate bond interest and dividends, the split income provisions, the depletion allowances for gas and oil wells. There are other such little tax matters as corporate spin-offs.
Well, Senator, suppose we take the first one you mentioned, the capital gains tax.
Yes.
What would you do about that? What's your recommendation on that?
Well, first of all, I want to make my position quite clear. I think that the capital gains tax schedule, which is to be differentiated from the earned income schedule and the corporate income schedule, is a legitimate tax schedule. I mean, it has a legitimate purpose. The purpose for it, when it was enacted, was to promote investment, capital improvement and investment. The original capital gains was for 25% tax, maximum of 25%, but you had to hold your property or your bond or your stock for a period of 2 years to give a sense of legitimacy to the investment. Now that period, that holding period, has been reduced from 2 years to 1 year to 6 months, and in the last 2 sessions of the Congress, they've tried to cut it down to 3 months when speculation has been rampant, particularly. By the way, every time you have a defense or a war situation, they always want to cut down the holding period on capital gains.
Well, Senator, isn't it true that on the other side, you cannot deduct capital losses against income?
You can deduct...
Well, except against about $3,000. So capital losses are not deductible. Therefore, you shouldn't tax capital gains as full income, should you?
Well, Mr. Hazlitt, I'm sure that you and I will have quite a disagreement about that, because when you talk about capital gains and capital losses, you can deduct capital losses from your capital gains.
From capital gains, but
so
not
you keep
against
it all
your
within
income.
the same house.
Yes,
can't
but
play
you
both sides
have
of the
to
street
add
here.
your capital gains tax to your income tax, but you cannot deduct your capital losses from your income. That's correct, isn't it?
But now, wait a minute. When you
and
say,
isn't that a heads I win, tails you lose?
No, what you
on the
have
part
is
of
the heads the government loses and tails you win.
I'm sorry, if the heads the government wins, and if the tails you lose, you the taxpayer loses, because you can't deduct it against your income. Now, that's the simple fact, Senator.
Mr. Hazlitt, There
Now,
are
I'm asking
several.
you
There
whether
are
what you
several,
would propose.
and you're a
personally.
wise economist, and you know that there are three basic tax structures in this country: the kind I pay, which is earned income tax; the kind that a corporation pays, which is corporate tax; and the kind that a speculator pays, which is capital gains tax. And the guy that's speculating on the market pays a lower tax rate than a worker that's earning $7,500
Not
a year.
on short-term gains.
On a
Not
short-term gain.
No, on
A
a short-term
6 month
gains, he pays the same as his
On a
income
6 months
tax.
gain, if he holds
Well, that
it-
is not considered a short-term
Well,
gain for
it-
a speculator. That's
it used to be- it used to
a speculator
require-
can't sit around 6 months.
It used to require 2 years for capital
That's
gains.
right.
What I am saying, Mr. Hazlitt, is that if you lose in the capital gains market, you can deduct your losses from your capital gains, and you only pay 26% under the present law upon your earnings.
But you either
However,
pay a
if
tax
I
or no
lose,
tax.
if I lose as a wage earner, if I lose as a wage earner 1 year, I cannot go back and deduct it from my taxes that I paid the other year.
But you don't pay
get-
taxes on it.
Senator Humphrey, that's an area in which I believe both or all three sides of the argument are agreed that whatever change might be made would be comparatively moderate. There's another area. You mentioned earlier the phrase depletion allowance, one that we hear a great deal about. Would you care to explain in general terms what the principle of the depletion allowance is?
Yes, I give a little historical background on the depletion allowance. It was enacted in the Congress, I believe, in the year 1925 or 26, right around that period. And the purpose of the depletion allowance for gas and oil and some mining interests, like sulfur, for example.
It's now been extended further to
It's
other...
been extended to about 45 commodities, and by the way, that's another one of the tricks. We even got it on oyster shells now, a depletion
Well,
allowance.
now, it's been extended by whom, Senator?
By the Congress. By the Congress, over the objections of the executive. Every time a special interest group, sand and gravel boys, wanted to get in on it last time.
Well,
now,
do you
what is
think
the
this
depletion?
is wicked to have a depletion allowance
No.
when there's real depletion?
No, I think a depletion allowance that's fair and equitable in terms of the scientific or the technology of the day is legitimate. Now, the purpose of the depletion allowance at first was to promote exploration of oil and gas fields. So we had a depletion allowance of 27.5%. But since that time, may I say, the scientific knowledge of where a gas field is and where an oil field is much better than it was in 1925.
But isn't,
Well, do
but
they
isn't it
actually
also
know
true,
how
Senator?
much- just a
Yeah.
minute, I'd just like to get this. They actually know how much oil is under the ground.
No, not in every instance.
Well, then
indeed
they don't
do.
know how much they're depleting it, do they?
But Mr. Hazlitt, a man in business gets what he calls a depreciation allowance. If you have a
Well,
$100,000
we're talking
factory,
about
you
a
can
depletion
depreciate it.
allowance, yes.
Now, a depletion allowance is a 27.5% upon your gross revenue.
Well, if
And
you're
the fact
depleting it
that-
in 3 years, then that would be right. You argue that they're
Wait a minute.
depleting it in a longer period.
Plus the fact that a man that drills an oil well and finds a dead hole, when he finally hits one, he can take all of the deductions for all of the losses that he had before.
But, Senator,
there are
isn't that...
45 separate gratuities or benefits given by the government for mining and gas and oil development.
But
45, which you didn't have in 1925, and I say that it's absolutely wrong in the year 1952 to have a depletion allowance of 27.5% on gross income when you have 45 special benefits today, which you didn't have at the time that the law was enacted.
There's a tremendous change in a great many respects between 1925 and 1952, however, insofar as the supply of oil and other critical raw materials are concerned.
That's correct. The supply is even, the known supply today is much greater than it was in 1925.
The known consumption is
and
many
may I
times
say that
greater.
the bond market for gas and oil wells are gilt-edged securities, and the profit percentage in gas and oil development is above any other commodity in the American market.
Well, Senator, as a last question, as a final question, do you think that there is a prospect in the near future of a reduction of taxes generally, or do you think the prospect is for higher taxes?
Well, I think it greatly depends upon the international situation, and I think the American people must know that the high schedule of tax today is primarily the result of the great international crisis. It is my feeling that as we level off and taper off on our rearmament program, that we can get these taxes down, and I think they should come down. The earned income tax and the corporate tax are terribly high. They're very high. And it's for that reason that I say that we should plug up these special treatment areas and thereby be able to at least level off the earned income tax rate and the corporate tax rate so that you don't knock out incentive in business and that you do not place an undue burden upon the individual that is having a pretty tough time making it go in this inflated period.
Well, Senator, thank you very much for your answers. They've been very illuminating, and we appreciate very much your being with us tonight.
Thank you.
The editorial board for this edition of the Longines Chronoscope was Mr. Edgar Baker and Mr. Henry Hazlitt. Our distinguished guest was the Honorable Hubert H. Humphrey, United States Senator from Minnesota. The Winter Olympic Games recently completed at Oslo in Norway were exclusively timed by Longines to a 10th and a 100th of a second. This telegram that I have here is our reward. Longines equipment used for all timekeeping during the Winter Olympic Games 1952. All worked perfectly. Thanks for your valuable cooperation. And it's signed the organizing committee. Now that's a wonderful telegram, and we're ever so pleased. Longines was actually official watch for the 3 great Olympic sports events during the past year. The Winter Olympics at Oslo, the 3rd Bolivarian Games at Caracas in Venezuela, and the 1st Pan American Games held in Buenos Aires in Argentina. And now we are proud to announce that the United States Olympic Committee has selected Longines watches for timing all events for the selection of the United States Olympic team of 1952. So you see, wherever precise timing is important, in sports, aviation, and science, as in everyday life, the preeminent choice of watches is Longines, the only watch in history to win 10 World's Fair Grand Prizes, 28 gold medals, and highest honors for accuracy from the leading government observatories. Longines, the world's most honored watch, premier product of the Longines Whitnall Watch Company, since 1866, maker of watches of the highest character. We invite you to join us every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday evening at this same time for the Longines Chronoscope, a television journal of the important issues of the hour, broadcast on behalf of Longines, the world's most honored watch, and Whitnall, distinguished companion to the world-honored Longines. This is Frank Knight reminding you again that Longines and Whitnall watches are sold and serviced by more than 4,000 leading jewelers from coast to coast, who proudly display this emblem, Agency for Longines Whitnall Watches. It's time for the Longines Chronoscope, a television journal of the important issues of the hour, brought to you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. A presentation of the Longines Whitnall Watch Company, maker of Longines, the world's most honored watch, and Whitnall, distinguished companion to the world-honored Longines. Good evening, this is Frank Knight. May I introduce our co-editors for this edition of the Longines Chronoscope? Mr. William Bradford Huey, editor of the American Mercury, and Mr. Robert D. Colburn, an editor of Business Week magazine. Our distinguished guest for this evening is the Honorable Irving M. Ives, United States Senator from New York.
Senator Ives, it's a pleasure to have you again on the Chronoscope tonight, sir. And earlier this week, we have had Mr. Franklin Roosevelt, Jr. and Mr. Averell Harriman, who have summed up the issues for our viewers. And tonight, sir, because will not be on the air Monday night because of the large wind-up programs, tonight is our last program before the election. And we'd like for you to sum up for the Republicans, just as Mr. Roosevelt and Mr. Harriman have done for the Democrats. Now, sir, a great deal of emphasis has been put on the Korean issue in these last few days of the campaign, and our Democratic spokesmen have accused General Eisenhower of being a little unfair in injecting the issue that he would go to Korea. Now, number one, sir, do you think that it has been an unfair tactic on the part of General Eisenhower?
Mr. Huey, I certainly do not. And at the same time, I want to tell you how much I appreciate being on this program again. I think that General Eisenhower, in undertaking a trip of that kind, is doing exactly what he should do. He is a military man. One of the greatest generals we've had in all time in this country.
Do you think it's primarily a military problem?
I do not. I think it's political also. But I think it's both military and political, and I think the general probably could get more out of it by going over there than almost anybody else in this country who would not be acquainted with it at first hand.
Would that be primarily an information gathering trip?
I would assume that's what he intends, to find out what is being done over there, how the equipment is, how the supplies are, how the men are, what the morale is at first hand, because, of course, he's had this tremendous experience, as few people have had, and he can understand it.
Do you think that that General Eisenhower would have a better chance of settling the Korean conflict than Governor Stevenson?
Well, I certainly do.
And one of the things that General Eisenhower injected was the fact that he would step up the training of South Koreans with the hope that he could relieve our own troops of bearing the brunt of the frontline battle. And for that, he was accused of some dishonesty. Now, sir, do you think that General Eisenhower has a valid point there?
Well, I think General Van Fleet's letter that was written indicating that General Van Fleet, had done all that he can do or could do within his capacity, within his ability, within the limit of the supplies and equipment and all that's concerned there, would permit, indicated that more can be done, and the fact that General Van Fleet now has said, or has stated, as I understand, that more can be done. If he had more equipment, he'd be able to do more supplies, he'd be able to do more, shows that General Eisenhower was absolutely justified in his statement.
What would you think would be a reason that necessary supplies and such would be withheld from that? Why would anybody be against training more Koreans, if it were practical?
I haven't the answer to that question. I don't know what the answer is. I haven't seen any official statement made on the subject from any source that is competent to offer such a statement. I can't see what it would be. I can't understand why we shouldn't. I don't know. I'm utterly sick and tired of this whole Korean tragedy. And I think the sooner we get the South Koreans in a condition where they can hold the front lines as far as they're able to hold them, the better off for all of us, the UN and ourselves included. And why the South Koreans haven't been placed in a condition where they can occupy those front lines, I don't know. I haven't seen any excuse of any kind offered for that.
Well, sir, you think that General Eisenhower's suggestion that we use more Asians to fight Asians is a sound suggestion?
That is the fundamental idea on which we were supposed to operate in the Orient from the beginning. We've always understood in this country that if we were going to fight any part of Asia, mainland of Asia, we should not do it with the troops of the Western powers. That the very fact that our Western troops are doing the fighting automatically gives to our action a wrong impression where those against whom we're fighting, or at least those who may be neutral over in that area, are concerned. They look upon it as a Western invasion of the Orient.
Do you think there's any Asian power that can deal with the Chinese?
Do I think what?
That there is any Asian power that can deal with the Chinese?
Well, yes, I think your South Koreans, properly trained, can deal with them insofar as it's possible, insofar as their numbers permit. There are 20 million people in South Korea. I don't know why they can't provide enough troops to hold them for a while. As a matter of fact, we've got to bring this South Korean thing to a termination one of these days. I understand that these people that say that this is only a peninsula, it's not a part of the mainland of Asia, insist that we're not in a mainland war, but I insist we are on Asia. Korea is a peninsula, yes, but we're on Asia. It's part of Asia. It's not an island. And we've always been led to believe, and I know of no reason why it isn't true, that if we ever get into a mainland war in Asia, we're going to be bled white. And that can very easily happen in Korea. Our casualties now are running, as you know, over 1,000 a week.
Well, sir, now moving on to what's generally regarded as the second big issue, and sort of summing up what's been said about communists in government. Do you think that General Eisenhower has been on sound ground there, or that there's been anything unfair in his approach to that issue?
Nothing unfair that I know of whatever. The whole record has indicated that the General's position is absolutely sound, absolutely vindicated.
Well, in terms of your particular interest, Senator, the FEPC question is a major issue in this case.
Well, I think you term it FEPC, I use a broader term. I think it's a question of civil rights. I think that's one of the fundamentally vital questions today. I believe thoroughly that we've got to begin to practice what we preach in this country. And if we mean what we say and what we profess to believe, it's high time we begin to carry out our convictions.
You're the author of New York state legislation on that subject.
I am. I'm the co-author of the so-called Ives-Quinn law. I'm the Ives in the deal.
How do you feel that your own views on that matter are in accord with the views of the platform, of the Republican National Platform?
The Republican National Platform, which was created there, you're talking about now the plank on civil rights, I assume. That plank is created in such broad terms that we can push ahead for a federal FEPC, if you desire to call it that, with enforcement provisions at any time that we can possibly get a chance to go ahead with it. There's nothing in our platform which prohibits anything of the kind. In fact, it's left wide open. Actually...
Would you anticipate such a chance next year?
Well, let me just point this out, if you don't mind, because this is important. Actually, during the course of that convention and during the course of the committee action on the matter in the convention, a proposition to limit FEPC activities to the level of the states and not to permit it on the federal level was defeated in committee by a vote of 39 to 30, demonstrating definitely that the position taken by the Republican Platform Committee, their resolutions committee, was definitely opposed to limiting FEPC operations to the state level, and thereby leaving the door wide open for the federal approach.
Well, now, those of our viewers who are concerned with civil liberties, civil rights, and who want during the next 4 years to see more and more done in that direction, do you think that they can safely go with the Republicans in 1952?
Well, I can't for the life of me see how they can have any hope of getting anything done through the Democrats. I mean, the very idea back of that is utterly ridiculous, because the history of civil rights, at least during the last 20 years, shows that the Republicans, from the standpoint of the filibuster and the attempt to get cloture, from the standpoint of activity in behalf of the legislation itself, and from the standpoint of the record all the way through, the Republicans have done far more in favor of civil rights from a legislative standpoint than have the Democrats in that same period. I won't go into the details of that because it's rather long and exhaustive, but actually the Republicans have done just about 20 times as much in the Senate.
If the Republicans control Congress next year, would you expect that some civil rights legislation would pass?
No, you can't pass civil rights legislation until we can conquer the filibuster. That's our first hurdle that we have to make, and that's where the drive should be made, directly on getting a cloture provision, Rule 22 as it's called, changed in such a way that we can put a limit or a stop to the filibuster by a majority vote of the members of the Senate. When that's done, then we can go ahead with civil rights legislation, and that's going to be a big hurdle to get over, and we've got to get over it, and we've got to use every ounce of energy we have in that attempt.
Moving to the other big issue, sir, labor legislation. Many of our viewers, of course, are interested in labor legislation, and I believe that that Mr. Stevenson has promised to repeal the Taft-Hartley Act outright. Now, what can you say on that subject, sir, in summing
When
up?
you're talking about Mr. Stevenson's position, I just start with that, because as I recall, Mr. Stevenson's position prior to his nomination was not in favor of repeal. He was opposed to repeal of the Taft-Hartley Act and in favor of its amendment. The minute he got the nomination, or immediately thereafter almost, he changed his position and came out for repeal of the Act. Well, now let me just point out what repeal amounts to as compared to amendment. The only thing that one gains by repeal is a change in the name of the Act. What is needed are very broad amendments to the Taft-Hartley Act to bring it into line with current conditions, and also to take out of it, remove from it, those particular sections which are not fair and which are not workable in a large measure. That should have been done back in 1948. And we who were trying to get sound labor relations legislation through the Taft-Hartley Act in the first instance expected that in 1948 we would finish the job by correcting the defects in the Act. Unfortunately, the President of the United States thought he had a wonderful political argument there and a wonderful political issue. And he did all he could to block it. And due to his control over the members of the Congress, the leaders anyway, and his party in the Congress, he was able to prevent any effective legislation being passed by the Congress during the period of time from 1948 to the present. That's what's happened.
I see. As a final brief question, sir, since you yourself are running for re-election in New York, how do you think New York will vote in your race and for General Eisenhower on Tuesday?
Well, I'm not going to predict regarding myself. I hope to win. I certainly shall do everything I can if I'm elected to carry on the work I've been doing down in the Congress and work to the best of my ability, and I shall appreciate winning if I can get there.
Well,
as far as the state's concerned, the state's going Republican for Eisenhower.
Well, thank you very much for being with us, sir.
The opinions you've heard our speakers express tonight are entirely their own. The editorial board for this edition of the Longines Chronoscope was Mr. William Bradford Huey and Mr. Robert B. Colburn. Our distinguished guest was the Honorable Irving M. Ives, United States Senator from New York. Next Tuesday, millions of Americans will go to the polls to exercise their right and privilege as citizens. Don't let your vote be lost, my friend, for freedom of choice is a very precious freedom. It extends throughout our life in this great republic, even to the things we buy. And it's to help you make your choice, to give you freedom of choice in the watch that you buy, that we tell you on this program the facts about Longines. It should mean something, and it does mean something, that in competition with the world's best watches, Longines is the only watch to win 10 World's Fair grand prizes and 28 gold medal awards. It should mean something, and it does mean something, that in competition with the world's most accurate watches, Longines has won countless prizes in competitive accuracy trials at the great government observatories. So if you wish to choose for your own or to select as a gift just about the finest watch made anywhere in the world, the facts about Longines should convince you. From personal experience, millions of discriminating men and women the world over have made this statement true. No other name on a watch means so much as Longines, the world's most honored watch, premier product of the Longines Whitnall Watch Company, since 1866, maker of watches of the highest character. We invite you to join us every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday evening at this same time for the Longines Chronoscope, a television journal of the important issues of the hour, broadcast on behalf of Longines, the world's most honored watch, and Whitnall, distinguished companion to the world-honored Longines.
The world's most honored watch is Longines. Longines watches have won 10 World's Fair grand prizes, 28 gold medals, and more honors for accuracy than any other timepiece. Longines, the world's most honored watch, is made and guaranteed by the Longines Whitnall Watch Company.
It's time for the Longines Chronoscope, a television journal of the important issues of the hour, brought to you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. A presentation of the Longines Whitnall Watch Company, maker of Longines, the world's most honored watch, and Whitnall, distinguished companion to the world-honored Longines. Good evening. This is Frank Knight. May I introduce our co-editors for this edition of the Longines Chronoscope? Mr. William Bradford Huey, editor of the American Mercury, and Mr. Donald I. Rogers, an editor of the New York Herald Tribune. Our distinguished guest for this evening is the Honorable John J. Sparkman, United States Senator from Alabama. The opinions expressed are necessarily those of speakers.
Senator Sparkman, among your many activities in the Senate, you're chairman of the Committee on Small Business, which is a mounting problem. Tonight, we'd like to have you tell us some of the things you and your committee are doing to help the small businessmen. First, sir, would you be kind enough to tell us what you consider to be the major problem of the small businessmen of America?
I believe that right now the major problem confronting the small business man of America is that of getting sufficient materials with which to continue operating his business.
Is there anything you or your committee can do to channel materials to him?
We can't channel the materials, but we can certainly keep after the various agencies that do that in order to make certain that small business gets its fair share.
Now, Senator, in effect, when you talk about small business, you mean a small manufacturer, do you not?
Ordinarily, that would be true, although not necessarily true, because service organizations would be small business just the same. However, they're not confronted with this problem of materials. Materials, naturally, is a problem confronting manufacturers.
And how do you define a small business? What do you think of as a small business, sir?
The Defense Department sets an arbitrary definition of small business as any business which, with its associates, employs not more than 500 persons.
Now, can you make a general statement about this business now, these small businesses? Are they generally suffering at present?
Yes, a great many small businesses are suffering because since the outbreak of war in Korea, there has been a scarcity of steel, aluminum, copper, nickel. Those have been the principal...
Is any one section of the country hurt worse than other sections?
I don't know that we could say one section was hurt worse than another, but it's spotty.
Some cities are, aren't they?
Well, that may be, yes, undoubtedly,
As a matter
that
of
is
fact,
true.
there are some cities defined as surplus labor areas, are there not?
Yes, all of those, however, are not due to small business problems. For instance, there's the automobile cutback in Detroit.
Yes, but how about Providence, Rhode Island, for instance?
Yes, that is one area that I had in mind a minute ago. There, it's primarily the jewelers,
which are small
watchmakers
businesses.
and things of
Yes.
that kind. Yes, that's true.
Now, what could you do to help a jeweler in Providence?
We believe that the Defense Department ought to find some use for them in making precision instruments, timing instruments, fuses, and things of that kind.
Could you give me an example of where your committee has helped a certain small business?
Yes, I'll go back a little piece. I can give you many, but since you've got us up in New England, I'll tell you one there. You know, in every heel, rubber heel of every shoe, there are a certain number of little tacks. I don't know whether you know that or not, but it's true. On the head of every one of those tacks is a little tiny washer.
Yes.
You can't put your rubber heels on the shoes unless you've got those washers. Those washers are made by just 2 or 3 small establishments up here in New England. Oh, a year or so ago, they got to the point where they couldn't get any steel with which to make those little washers. And because they couldn't make the washers, the shoe industry was confronted with a very serious situation. We got busy and got steel for them to make their washers.
You took that
I could give you dozens of examples.
But you took that steel from some military operation, did you not?
No, we simply saw that the steel was channeled in there. No, there was plenty of steel. It just simply, some mistake had been made and they didn't get their fair share.
Senator, on our show the other night, Mr. Arthur Fleming of the Manpower Commission was here, and he told us that the plans were being made now on the assumption that this defense emergency will continue over a period of 10 to 15 years. Now, in your thinking of your committee in the Senate, are you making the same assumption that we have something like a 10 to 15-year plan before us?
I don't think we can safely make any other assumption. Let me say this, though. It's at the present time, we're building up. That doesn't mean that we're going to continue to build up for over a period of 10 or 15 years. I believe the present program calls for getting tooled up into our maximum production by July 1st, 1954. Then we'll be able to level off. And I think that is what he must have had in mind, lasting over a period of 10 or 12, 15 years.
Level off at peak production, you mean?
At peak capacity.
Yes.
Not necessarily that we'll be producing the tanks and guns, but we'll be tooled up to the point that we can produce them.
Tell me this, Senator. Do you find that the government, per se, the administration, is sympathetic to small business, or is it dealing mostly with the larger businesses?
Well, I don't think the two necessarily go together. Yes, I think...
it's not a loaded question. I mean,
no.
Is the government cognizant of the problem that small business has?
Yes, sometimes I think that some of the agencies are not as keenly alert to them as they ought to be. I'll tell you what my thought has been. It's simply this, that it's so easy and safe to do business with big business. First of all, they have their representatives there. They help work out everything. They have fine records. They know that they're capable of doing it. They've done it in the past, and so on and so forth. It's easier to do business with them. But we believe they ought to exert a little extra effort in order to keep this highly essential part of our national economy. By the way, remember this, that 90% of the businesses of America are small businesses.
Senator, that's very interesting. But our audience also knows you as a very influential Southern senator, and I'm sure they'd like to have your views. First, where do you stand in the political firmament? Are you a Southern New Dealer? Do you think of yourself as being a New Deal senator?
No, I don't think of myself as being a New Deal senator. I've always felt that I was rather independent, and I think most of the Southerners are.
Now, where do you stand in the fight now, the presidential fight? Are you for Senator Russell for the presidential nomination?
The Alabama delegation supported Senator Russell in the 1948 convention in Philadelphia. We think very highly of Senator Russell. I know of no one that I would rather support than he.
And do you take the traditional Southern position on civil rights legislation?
On so-called civil rights legislation, I do.
Suppose General Eisenhower becomes a Republican nominee. Do you have any predictions on the outcome of the vote in the South?
I would say this: it's hard for me to envision the South voting for anybody under the Republican emblem.
Yes.
You know, there's a tradition down there.
Yes, I've heard it.
In Alabama, we have the crowing rooster as our symbol, and people, when they go to the polls in November, don't many of them go then, but when they do go, they like to make their cross under that rooster. It's going to be pretty hard to get them to make the cross under an elephant, regardless of who's on that ticket. But let me say this: General Eisenhower is very, very popular in the South.
More popular than any other Republican candidate, you
I think that's true. Yes. I think that's true.
You are also a powerful member of the Banking and Currency Committee, Senator, and our audience has heard a great deal about the Reconstruction Finance Corporation. Now, do you think that all of the corruption has been cleared up there?
I believe that it has. I think Senator Fulbright and his subcommittee did an excellent job in digging into the RFC, and since that time there's been a reorganization of it along the line that Senator Fulbright himself suggested. We have a single administrator. We've just the Senate has just confirmed a new one, and I believe he's going to do a good job.
And on the subject of taxes, which a great many people are thinking of about this time, where do you stand? Are you, believe, economy-minded this year? Do you want to cut the budget?
Yes, I do.
Would you cut foreign aid?
I think foreign aid, let me put it this way. I'm on the Foreign Relations Committee.
Yes.
That bill will come before us. I know that we will examine it most carefully. And last year we cut it a little more than $1 billion. I should not be surprised to see it cut some this year also.
What is your prediction for the cut on the overall budget?
I'm also on the Joint Economic Committee, and for the last 2 or 3 weeks we've been wrestling with that very problem. I suppose it's all right for me to say that our report will probably come out tomorrow morning, and we're going to recommend that every effort be made to bring the budget into balance. And to do that...
That would be a what?
Well, of course, that's hard to tell, but it probably would entail a cut in the budget of something like $7 or $8 billion, maybe even as much as $10 billion.
How much would you cut from foreign aid under this?
Let me put it this way. I'm on the committee to pass on it, and I don't want to prejudge it. If I had to make a rough guess, I would guess that $1 billion at least would be cut out of foreign aid.
And do you believe in balanced budget yourself?
Yes, very strongly. I think that an unbalanced economy with the inflationary pressures that are generated as a result of it could give us a tremendous lot of trouble.
And what do you think about taxes? Are you in favor of cutting taxes as soon as possible?
Oh, yes, but I don't know. We're not going to be able to cut them for a couple of years anyhow. So I thought you'd go ask me if I was going to be in favor of raising taxes. That's what most of the talk is about now. I'm not in favor of increasing taxes.
You're not in favor of increasing them? You think that they'll remain about where they are for at least another 2 years?
Yes, I see no chance of lowering them under 2 years.
I'm sure that our audience has very much appreciated your views tonight. Thank you for being with us, sir.
The editorial board for this edition of the Longines Chronoscope was Mr. William Bradford Huey and Mr. Donald I. Rogers. Our distinguished guest was the Honorable John J. Sparkman, United States Senator from Alabama. You've heard it said, of course, most people know the price of everything and the value of nothing. Now, that's just not true. Certainly not for Longines watches, for more people know the value of a Longines watch than its price. Do you know, for instance, that there are many models of the world's most honored watch which sell for as little as $71.50? So, if you pay $71.50 or more for a watch, You're paying the price of a Longines, the world's most honored watch. Why not insist on getting a Longines? Honored for excellence and elegance by 10 World's Fair grand prizes and 28 gold medals. Honored for accuracy by innumerable honors from the great government observatories. Honored for honesty in fields of precise timing in sports, aviation, exploration, and science. So if you wish to purchase a very fine watch, either for yourself or as a gift, look for the value in the watch you buy. And let your choice be Longines, the world's most honored watch. Premier product of the Longines Whitnor Watch Company since 1866. Maker of watches of the highest character. This is Frank Knight again inviting you to be with us every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday evening at this same time for the Longines Chronoscope, a television journal of the important issues of the hour, broadcast on behalf of Longines, the world's most honored watch, and Whitnor, distinguished companion to the world-honored Longines, sold and serviced from coast to coast by more than 4,000 leading jewelers who proudly display this emblem, Agency for Longines Whitnor Watches. It's time for the Longines Chronoscope, a television journal of the important issues of the hour, brought to you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. A presentation of the Longines Whitnor Watch Company, maker of Longines, the world's most honored watch, and Whitnor, distinguished companion to the world-honored Longines. Good evening. This is Frank Knight. May I introduce our co-editors for this edition of the Longines Chronoscope? Mr. William Bradford Huey, editor of the American Mercury, and Mr. Donald I. Rogers, an editor of the New York Herald Tribune. Our distinguished guest for this evening is the Honorable Joseph R. McCarthy, United States Senator from Wisconsin. The opinions expressed are necessarily those of the speakers.
Senator McCarthy, you're probably the most controversial figure on the American political scene. McCarthy and McCarthyism are well-known words. I'm sure our audience is very much interested in your political career, so suppose we start right out, sir. Tell us about the campaign in Wisconsin. You're running for re-election, I believe.
I can't tell you too much about it, Mr. Rogers, except I heard that a new man announced today. It will be a tough, close contest, I think, in the primary.
In the primary,
yes,
a Republican opponent.
I've got 3 or 4 Republican opponents, and I heard now, and I hope that I'm correct in this, I heard that a new man, Len Schmidt, announced today.
This is the man who ran for governor, is it not?
He ran for governor 2 years ago and ran up a sizable vote.
If Mr. Schmidt...
an effective campaigner, he is.
Yeah. He is an effective campaigner, and you regard Mr. Schmidt, if he's running, as your perhaps most dangerous opponent.
I wouldn't want to insult the other young men who are running by saying they were not dangerous.
I see. And then you say that the primary fight will be serious. What kind of primary do you have? Is it an open primary? Do both Democrats and Republicans vote in the Republican primary?
Yes, we have an unusual situation in Wisconsin, Mr. Huey. The Democrats can all vote in the Republican primary if they care to, and the Republicans, of course, could vote in the Democratic primary if they cared to. That means that if the Democrats could induce enough of their Democrats to come over in the Republican primary and vote against me, it could make it very rough.
Could be dangerous for McCarthyism, couldn't it?
Well, of course, I should say that I think that I'll get about as many Democrat votes out there as any other candidate. We get some awfully good Democrats in Wisconsin.
Is this going to be one of those campaigns that considerable amounts of money will be spent from outside the state? Do you expect the money will be spent there, sent into Wisconsin to try to help defeat you?
There is a fortune being sent into Wisconsin already. In fact, I think there's been more campaign literature put out by my opposition up to this time than there normally has been during an entire campaign. On top of that, in addition to that, I should say, there's a book coming out being written by one of Drew Pearson's men, a man from the New York Post. Originally, they were going to call it The Hairy Ape or The Missing Link. I guess the new name they have for it is the senator and the ism or something like that. It'll be all the usual smear by innuendo. It's going to be an unpleasant campaign. No
Well,
question about
speaking of support from out of the state, you have been supported or endorsed by such gentlemen as Gerald L.K. Smith and Upton Close. Do you accept their support? Do you welcome it?
I don't think I have been endorsed or supported by Gerald Smith or Upton Close. Not that I know of. Let me say this. I am not going to pass upon any man, no matter what his reputation is. I know certain men have reputations of being anti-Semitic. I'm sure that no one can point to anything in my background to show that I am anti any particular group.
I have here...
None of my votes, nothing else.
I have here, Senator McCarthy, a publication called Headlines and What's Behind Them. Another publication called Conspiracy, the Philip Drew Case. Are you familiar with these?
Not with the publication, Mr. Rogers.
They mention your name in here, endorsing you, and they also mention that General Eisenhower is part of a Semitic plot to overthrow the world. It's part of the literature that's circulating about. Do you know about these publications?
No, I don't. But may I say that whether Eisenhower or Taft is nominated, in either event, I think we'll have a good nominee. And by saying Eisenhower or Taft, I don't want to exclude the possibility of another great American like General MacArthur, or we've got some other good candidates. But I'm not at all disturbed about the Americanism, the loyalty of any of the front-running candidates we have. I think they're good Americans. I think they're good Republicans too.
On the national scene.
And may I say that any publication which intimates that there's anything un-American about any of our front-running candidates is mistaken, putting it mildly.
All of our candidates, in your opinion, are solid American gentlemen.
All of those front-running candidates, all of those that have been mentioned in connection with
these publications which endorse you and oppose General Eisenhower, you do not believe should be circulated, do you?
I don't know what's in that publication, Mr. Rogers. All I can say is that I've been taking no part in the presidential race. I've been fully satisfied that regardless of which one of the men are nominated, he'll be a good candidate. We've got a bunch of good delegates at Chicago, good Americans. I won't be afraid to support him to the hilt, and I intend to do that, regardless of who's nominated on the Republican ticket, that is.
Well, Senator, now speaking of campaigns, do you expect to campaign outside of Wisconsin between now and November?
Mr. Huey, I owe some heavy obligations to other senators, men who have come to my aid when things look blackest in this fight against communism government. Some of them are in the so-called marginal states. If they think they're having difficulty in their Senate race, if they think that I can help them, I will come into their states. I may say this, that if the Republicans should take over the Senate, I happen to be the ranking member on the investigating committee. That means that McCarthy would become chairman of the Senate Investigating Committee, and if he does, I'll make you one promise, that Leavenworth won't hold him, Mr. Huey.
You're going to use the same tactics that you have used right along, sir.
Oh, now, and you say the same tactics. You see, if you have a committee, the power to subpoena investigators, you don't use the same tactics you use when you have no committee, no power to subpoena, where you've got to dig and root out the communists and the crooks and those who are bad for America.
Yes.
Where you have a committee, so that you have the power of subpoena, you can get the records, and if we have a Republican president, we'll be able to get those records, I'm sure. It will be a less spectacular fight, but much more effective. You see, it's difficult when you're all alone with the entire power of this federal bureaucracy against you. Difficult to dig them out. Even at that, you see, we have gotten out of government 11 of those I originally named. Some of them have been convicted, others before the grand jury, but all out of the government under the loyalty program.
And I know you do too, that Mr. Lattimore has been requested not to leave the country.
Well, Mr. Lattimore was not one of the 11 because he was no longer in the government. He had been used as an advisor, but I didn't count him amongst the 11.
Senator, now
he's not being used any longer.
You spoke of...
May I say something further in answer to Mr. Rogers' comment? The State Department has been taking credit for the ban upon Lattimore's leaving the country. That is just improper because the State Department did not initiate that ban.
Who did?
It was the Justice Department. The Justice Department either phoned or wrote Miss Shipley's division, in the Visa Division, and said close the Canadian borders, close the Mexican borders, close the Atlantic, close the Pacific to Owen Lattimore. Don't let him leave the country.
Is this the result of our new Attorney General?
I don't know. The previous Attorney General, McGrath, was a good friend of mine. I am very happy to see the new Attorney General apparently going about his job in a good, serious fashion. May I make just another 10 seconds? If I were making predictions, I would make this prediction tonight. That is this: the State Department will use every bit of power at their disposal to try and get Owen Lattimore out of this country within the next 2 or 3 months.
You must have reasons for saying that, sir.
Very good reasons, and may I suggest that you just watch what happens over the next few weeks and few months, and you'll understand why.
Now, let me understand these two predictions that you've made, Senator. They sound very important to me. You are predicting for our viewers that within the next few weeks, the State Department will use its influence to get Professor Lattimore outside the country.
That's correct.
Can you say why, sir?
Frankly, I can't. I mean, I could, but for reasons which I'll explain to you after we get off the air, I just couldn't do it here tonight.
Now,
you'll understand why within a matter of
all right,
weeks or months.
I'll call our viewers' attention to your prediction.
Will you do that?
And now the other thing that I'd like to get very clear, because it sounds important, if you're re-elected senator, and if there's a Republican victory this fall, then you will be chairman of the present, what's known as the McCarran Committee, will you not?
No, not the McCarran Committee. It's now known as the Senator Huey Committee. Formerly the Truman Committee. It's the Special Senate Investigating Committee.
I see. And you also made the prediction that if you get control of that committee, that you expect to fill up Leavenworth and a few more of the federal prisons. Is that correct?
Yes, I think, Mr. Huey, that any good American in charge of that investigating committee
Senator, there's one other.
Do that.
You mentioned a book, and there's one book here that we should call our viewers' attention to. It's your book that is published today, I believe.
Yes.
Now, in effect, what's the message of this book to the people of America, sir?
Well, Mr. Huey, we call that book McCarthyism: The Fight for America. It is a carefully documented history of the fight to expose communists, bad security risks, and the dupes and stooges of the Kremlin who have been and still are in our federal government.
Well, Senator,
may I say this also, if we've got...
I'm sorry that our time is up, but I'm sure that our viewers have appreciated your very forthright views, and thank you for being with us, sir.
Thank you.
The editorial board for this edition of the Longines Chronoscope was Mr. William Bradford Huey and Mr. Donald I. Rogers. Our distinguished guest was the Honorable Joseph R. McCarthy, United States Senator from Wisconsin. The United States Olympic Committee has chosen Longines watches to time all events for the selection of the United States Olympic team of 1952. Thanks to the fine financial response of the public, a full team representing virtually all amateur sports will go to Helsinki, and the members of the team are selected through competitive trials. And to time these events, Longines has provided some 100 Longines Olympic timing watches, like this, the world's finest timing watch, with accuracy certified by bulletins from a government observatory. Now, because of such demonstrated accuracy, Longines has chosen to time championship sports events the world over. The 1952 Olympic Winter Games, the first Pan American Games, and the third Bolivarian Games. Longines is official watch for the contest board of the American Automobile Association, the American Powerboat Association, the National Aeronautic Association, and many, many others. And it's because also of the exceptional trustworthiness and the accuracy that Longines watches like these have that they're the first choice with discriminating men and women throughout the world. Longines, the world's most honored watch, premier product of the Longines Whitnor Watch Company. Since 1866, maker of watches of the highest character. We invite you to join us every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday evening at this same time for the Longines Chronoscope, a television journal of the important issues of the hour, broadcast on behalf of Longines, the world's most honored watch, and Whitnor, distinguished companion to the world-honored Longines. This is Frank Knight, reminding you that Longines and Whitnor watches are sold and serviced from coast to coast by more than 4,000 leading jewelers who proudly display this emblem. Agency for Longines Whitnor watches.